All right, good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Eric Moeller. I'm the Director for Product Marketing at RELX Solutions. And yes, this morning we're going to be talking about how product marketers can define our strategies and actually link those to the goals that our businesses are trying to achieve. So in terms of what we'll discuss, I'll quickly do some introductions for who I am, who RELX is, just so you know a little bit about that. I'll clarify a little bit about what we're talking about, because there's a lot of words that get thrown around, I find, when we're talking about product, we're talking about strategies and goals. So I want to try to make some of that a little bit clearer, and we'll also talk a little bit about what's the hard part with all this as well. So before I talk about who RELX is, I'm originally from Canada. As you can tell, I'm not local to the area. Moved to the UK about 12 years ago. So if you're looking for any travel tips for Canada or suggestions on how to survive a bear encounter, I'm your guy, so come talk to me afterwards. As mentioned, my background is I worked for SAP for about 12 years, worked in a lot of different areas there, worked for Sage for about 5 years, worked independently as a consultant for a little while, and then made the move to RELX about a year ago. And it was actually quite interesting. See, it was like getting back to my earlier roots in the tech world, where I'd worked for very large companies. I think when I was working at SAP, it was about 85,000 people. I think it's more than 100,000 now. So then now suddenly I'm at a company where it's about 1,700 people. It's a Finnish company. It's been around for about 15 years. And the products that we sell, we actually sell supply chain software, and you can see retail planning platform. It's for retailers and for CPG companies. So some of the companies in the UK that people would know would be M&S Food, Morrisons, Homebase, Pets at Home. So these are the types of companies that buy our products. In terms of what I'm trying to highlight here at the top right, again, not that you can see the specifics from the back there, but this is a company that's gone through dramatic growth over the past 15 years. Since the pandemic, we've actually doubled our size of revenue and the headcount of the company. So it's rapidly growing. It's a fast-growing scale-up. So that was definitely what appealed to me. I was very happily working at Sage, was contacted by a recruiter, and they said, hey, we've got this really cool company to take a look at. And I was just amazed by the speed of growth of the company. I was thinking, when a company's growing that fast, it's not by accident. And when you look at what was actually happening, they had amazing products, fantastic technology, but a very immature product marketing function. That was really why they were bringing me in. They had a handful of product marketers. They didn't really have anyone who had a background leading product marketing. They could actually bring the group together. Again, here comes the part with strategies to help them achieve their goals. So that was why I was brought on. And again, in terms of the size of the team, to give a sense, it's a very small team. There's only 8 of us. Most of the colleagues are in Helsinki. We have some in Sweden, some in the US, then I'm obviously based here in the UK. So again, what we're talking about, product marketers, how we can define the strategies to help our businesses that we're working for achieve their goals. So one thing I've found is that there are one of the common challenges, I think, for product marketers is that one is we throw a lot of these words out there. We're not really clear on exactly how they're different, and just slow ourselves down and say, how are these things different, and also how do these actually go together? The time that I spent working at SAP and at Sage, I also found that a lot of the things that you would need are actually missing, that often there was a jump straight from tactics all the way to goals. And again, what we want to do is break that down, be really clear what we're talking about, and actually look at what does that look like in the organization. And again, I'm intentionally making this as simple as possible, but really what we have tactics, what are those steps or what are those specific actions that we're taking, strategies, what's that overall plan of attack in terms of how we're trying to achieve an outcome, and then ultimately the goals and objectives, what we actually want to produce. Now, one thing, when I was presenting this to my team earlier in the week, they said, wait a minute, this seems like it's in reverse order, but this isn't actually, it's just to clarify the term. So really what we want to do is we want to start with our goals, again, define what those strategies are, and then the tactics dictate what actually feeds into how you're going to achieve these things. Let's get the build here. So again, it's not that we're starting with tactics, so that's the other thing just to clarify. So we have company goals, again, you can see here on the right. Again, probably these are things that are very similar to your organization. We want to grow the revenue. We want to increase our retention rates. We want to increase our net promoter score. We also want to look at ways we can actually increase our margins. So again, the company dictates those goals, and we're the product marketing organization that I'm part of, we actually report into the product organizations. The product organization also has its own goals. So again, those are the things that we're always starting from. Now, when you think about the strategies, it's really The way that I think about it, because I'm a big advocate for sales copywriting, it really is all about how do we have better positioning and messaging. So again, that is really the core of our strategy at RELX, the product marketing team. So specifically, the work I've been working with our team on is how are we making it really clear the specific problems, the painful business problems that we can solve for our customers. We also want to spend more time thinking about how our solutions are sufficiently differentiated from what's in the marketplace and really how they're better from what our competitors are offering. The third key part of our strategy, how are new products and capabilities, how can those actually solve other business challenges for our customers? So in our case, what we have is we actually have a very large product portfolio that has generated probably about 95% of our revenue, and through acquisition and through other growth opportunities, we're actually trying to broaden the types of products that we sell to our customers. So cross-sell is a massive part of what we're doing. So again, we have to think about this idea of a land and expand approach. We've actually won these customers. How are we actually expanding the footprint within the customer base? So those are some of the high-level strategies. In terms of the tactics, now I should have clarified this earlier. Some of the things, again, with a new product marketing team that I was suddenly managing, they're saying, we're really busy doing all these different things, but we're not really sure how does this all link together. And that was actually the genesis for putting this slide together. This is something that we've talked about within our team. Because again, it's very easy for a lot of product marketers to be heads down, doing lots of different things, running in every different direction, incredibly busy. You're thinking, how ultimately is this helping the things that we're trying to achieve? So that was really the idea of putting all these things together. So tactics, and again, these are things that are very specific to our company. But I'll just talk through some of these things. So we wanted to make sure there was a clear link between customer challenges, solutions, and outcomes. When I first joined the company, what we often found, again, it's a Finnish company, they're very tech-focused. They'd say, okay, well, this is the new capability, and this is the benefit of that. I said, well, that's nice, but we actually need to go a lot earlier in this process. We need to talk about what is the painful business problem that's keeping the customer up at night. Let's always start there because, again, that's the easy thing that the customer can identify with. They can say, actually, when you describe the pain that way, that's something that resonates with me. I understand what that is. So we've spent a lot of time in the past year actually looking at that. And again, the clear link between customer challenges, solutions, and outcomes, really that's about how we solve painful business problems. That's what helps us increase revenue. So again, there's this link between all these different things we're doing. Another one we have in tactics, regional focus. So RELX, as I mentioned, is a Finnish software company. The way that it grew, it started selling to customers in Finland, then it started expanding in the Nordics, then through Western Europe, and then it started to move on to other continents. So a big focus right now for us is how do we actually go big in America? And then they figured, let's hire this Canadian guy because clearly he understands the Americans. So we'll see how that works out. But in our case, we have this emphasis now of how do we actually spend more time focusing on what the US market needs? Because clearly we've nailed it in Western Europe. How do we actually spend more time focusing on that? So part of this is working with sales colleagues, field pre-sales, talking to them, what are they hearing from customers? And again, all those things channel into how do we solve painful business problems? Talking to them also gives us a sense of are we actually getting scale with the message? What we're actually defining here in Europe, is that actually translating for the market there? So again, these are these things where the tactics link to the strategies and ultimately supporting the goals. Vertical content, that's another thing, is we were spending a lot of time, again, just talking about solutions. So it's almost like if you need forecasting replenishment software, come here. And the thing is, again, the customers don't necessarily think about it the exact same way. They might say, well, actually, I'm a DIY retailer. How can you help me? So that was a big thing for us this year, is we spent a lot more time talking about the verticals from their perspective. So again, if you're in that market, what are the typical challenges that you're facing? Again, all this helps us have better positioning and messaging. Messaging targeted at more specific buyer personas. Again, in the past, we would just write a message and hope it landed with someone. So we've actually spent a lot of time defining what are those key buyer personas. Because as I mentioned, we have main products and we have some others that we're trying to cross-sell, some other areas we're trying to branch out to. So we need to be really clear on who are our different buyer personas. And now it's just interesting because we're having different types of conversations internally in terms of who is this specifically for and how does that actually connect to the painful business problems that they have. So again, that's a big thing, a tactic, creating buyer personas and how that ultimately supports our strategy. Cross-portfolio messaging and consistency. So again, as I mentioned, we're big in one product area. We're trying to expand to others. Some of the areas that we're trying to expand to, we've actually gone into via acquisition. So now you can imagine, again, I don't know how many of you have actually been either an acquired company or worked where you've acquired a company as well. And it's just interesting because it sometimes can be apples and oranges in terms of the marketing collateral that you have and how you talk about things and the tone of voice and how you approach these things. So again, we want to make sure that things are very consistent so it looks like one company and how we're communicating with our customers. Competitive intelligence, this is always an interesting thing when you're a small team of 8 people. There is no dedicated competitive intelligence function at RELX, whereas when I worked at Sage and SAP, they had massive teams and they would actually even help support deals to make sure that they could be won. So again, it's a very scaled down thing. So again, we're looking at very specifically, we don't have the luxury of doing absolutely everything competitive intelligence. So what we have to do is actually be really clear on if the competitor says this is how we counter it. So again, it's really tactical in terms of how do we actually support the sales colleagues and those types of things. I'll skip over the unified solution story, but this is really what we're also trying to do is talk about how all of our products go together. So ultimately, again, it makes some of these things like cross-sell a lot easier to do. Another one we had for a tactic is all products have product marketing messaging provided. Again, depending on what it's like at your organization, if you're at a smaller organization, sometimes there are products that don't actually have product marketing coverage. And that was the case when I joined, that we had about half the products had product marketers, the other half didn't. The danger if there's no product marketers, the product managers will figure it out on their own. And again, you can guess how that story ends. It's not always a great ending. So one of the things that we've done is, again, we've hired a bunch of people, so we've doubled. So I know it doesn't sound like a large team, it's 8. It was 4 at the beginning of the year. So again, we've got more hands on deck to be able to do this thing and make sure that we have messaging for everything and it's to the right standard that's needed to win in the marketplace the way that we want to win. Oh, and yes, providing input on all customer-facing product-related content. The other thing, too, we're trying to think about is how can product marketing have the biggest impact at our organization as possible? So things like technical documentation, even though we don't write the technical documentation, we certainly want to make sure that it supports our positioning and messaging in the marketplace. So we're building up relationships with those parts of the organization. Similarly, we have a central pre-sales group that actually does all our RFIs and RFPs. They have something called the RFX Answer Bank. So now we're working with them to make sure that when the company's responding to RFIs and RFPs, that it's also reflecting our messaging and positioning. So again, we want to make sure that wherever there is product messaging, we want to be all over that. Again, we have a content marketing team at our company, so we're working really closely with them to make sure the positioning for the products is exactly as it needs to be. And then the last one I'll just touch on here, commercial launches. This was really surprising to me when I joined the company. I said, yeah, what is our launch process for when we're actually bringing new products to market? And they said, well, actually, we don't really have one. I couldn't believe it. And I started talking to the sales colleagues, and they're saying, if you could fix anything, let's please get that sorted. So again, commercial launch is a very tactical thing that we're doing right now. But what had happened in the past with our company, again, being, are there any Finns in the audience here? Okay, there's one. Okay, there you go. So you know the persona, again, they're very meticulous, they're very detail-oriented. It's a very engineering kind of culture. So what would happen is they develop these amazing products and they just quietly sneak out the door. And what we'd end up having is there'd be a long lead time, or lag time rather, before customers were actually using things. And that's one of the things we're trying to do now, is how do we actually get customers excited so they're adopting these things a lot faster? And again, obviously that also facilitates things like cross-selling. So the commercial launches is a really big thing for us. We're actually getting that going. And it's been interesting because every company I've worked for before this always had a process in place. And now suddenly you think, okay, we actually have to create a process. And it's also a big change management exercise because we haven't done this before, trying to get people on site, get them bought into the vision, getting them excited. So this is something we've been kind of selling internally for about 8 months. And we're actually going to have our very first launch at the beginning of February. And again, what does that, because really at the end of the day, what is a commercial launch? It's an event, right? It's a tactical thing that ultimately supports how we're trying to get customers to understand how we can help them solve their painful business problems. And ultimately, we want to grow our revenue, and again, all the other things you can see on the slide. So that is all that I prepared today because I really wanted to share that. Again, that's simply how we're looking at it at RELX. It's been really helpful for us. As I mentioned, with the new team, they were lacking that leadership. So we thought, okay, we're doing a lot of different things. How do we try to give this some structure so you can actually see how the things you're working on actually supports the strategies which are ultimately supporting the goals? You can find me on LinkedIn. I would be happy to chat with anyone here, and obviously would love to take questions that you may have as well.
That was great.
Thanks.
Let's give one more round of applause for Eric. That was very great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can we get the Slido questions? I can pull them up here as well. Okay, let's pick a couple of these questions. One of the top voted questions is, what is the biggest challenge or issue that you are facing as a product marketing team at RELX? How are you looking to solve it?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I think, again, because we're only 8 people, I think the big thing for us right now is scale. There's so many different things we can be doing, so we're trying to actually reverse engineer how can we actually write our positioning, messaging, content in one place and then ultimately scale up, because with 8 people, 1,700 people company, hey, can you look at this? Can you look at that? Can you be involved in this? So scale is our biggest challenge, and we're really looking at how can, and it's interesting, because then we create processes that make things a lot easier, and it becomes predictable, almost like a factory, I guess, in a way.
Wow, that's fascinating that you're figuring out how to do that for at such a big scale for the first time. Lots of like internal training and coaching. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Fun.
People would like to know, can you tell us a bit about why product marketing should report into product and the advantages of doing so?
Sure. That's always an interesting one. So I think my most interesting experience with this was when I worked at Sage. So I was there for about 5 years, and it felt like there was a reorg every 9 months. So we were almost like this ping pong going back and forth. So we were in product, then we're back into marketing, back into product, back into marketing. So it was definitely all over the place. So I can definitely speak firsthand on that one. At RELX, the way that it works is we actually report into the product organization. And truthfully, I think my view on this is that I think you could actually have product marketing reporting into either function. I think the key thing is you want to be clear that you have a really strong link with both product and marketing. Even though I don't report into my team doesn't report into marketing, we're working with those colleagues on a daily basis, and we have to, and actually when they do their offsites, they include us as well. So we're just marketers by another name. But I don't think it necessarily matters. I think it's more about the relationships that you have and making sure there's really strong interlock. And it's also interesting too with my team, because they are on specific products, whereas I'm leading the team, I find that most of my interactions are with the marketing team, whereas with the colleagues on my team, they're actually probably splitting their time between liaising with the product organization, the product managers, as well as the marketers. So I think arguably it could really be both, as long as there's a good culture of collaboration and working together, I think.
Got it. Okay. And then one last question. I think people really liked your slide about the tactics and how do you connect it to strategy. We've got a question here about one of those specific tactics. How do you measure the success of your product messaging and positioning? What kind of KPIs are you using?
Oh God, that's always the toughest question, isn't it? Yeah. So the way that it works for us is that, ultimately we have variable compensation based on the company achieving its top line revenue goals, and then the different portfolio owners, the product marketers, actually, they also have a KPI related to that. So it's very indirect, but that's ultimately how we're doing it, is ultimately at the end of the year, how is it driving revenue?
Got it. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. That was
My pleasure.
great.
Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause. Yeah.